One of the things I've been doing today is discuss on Twitter the subject of Roe and Wade. As you know, it's the idea that the right to abortion of a woman should not be unnecessarily restricted. And the leaking of the draft judgment of the Supreme Court is clearly an attempt to intimidate the judges into not going against Roe and Wade. I don't think it's actually necessary to go against Roe and Wade. There is actually nothing in the Quran or the Torah that says you can't have an abortion. There are plenty of things that these these holy books are quite specific about, but it doesn't say anything about abortion. So I don't see why it should be forbidden. I mean, people who are against the country, the government being unnecessarily restrictive about abortion could well argue about that. There's already a very established legal difference between abortion and infanticide, though, of course, you can argue that they are used to accomplish pretty much the same reason and are caused by the same kind of behavior. You wouldn't suffer from unwanted pregnancy if you were practicing contraception and not sleeping around. While I'm aware that there are married women who have asked for abortions for one reason or another, the fact is that most women who have abortions are, in fact, spinsters who want to get rid of their mistake. And the best way of dealing with it would be to reinforce the point that no one is to have offspring without a marriage license. In America, it was called a marriage license. It wasn't called a marriage certificate, and calling it a license made it very clear what the piece of paper was for, that it gave you the license to have sex with your spouse and children with him or her. And this is such an easy concept to understand, but the Americans have chosen to get their knickers in a twist about Roe and Wade. Because it's framed in these terms um, of not being unnecessarily restrictive about giving a woman an abortion, there will be, lots of arguments about what it means to be unnecessarily restrictive, and if the Americans decided to go with secular Quranism just for one moment, let's entertain the idea for a moment, and America were an Islamic state, and chapter 24, verse 2 of the Quran were the law, and it says, give fornicators 100 lashes. So the obvious way of interpreting it would be that anyone caught having children without a marriage certificate would be guilty and deserve 100 lashes. And this is actually quite a liberal interpretation of it, because technically you could be really fierce and strict about it and say anyone who has indeed had sex would be guilty and be lashed even if they never got pregnant and the baby were never born. Of course, it could be stricter later, but I'm saying at this stage, the interpretation should be made for the purposes of criminalizing unmarried parents. So you give these people who are obviously sexually incontinent and can't deal with the idea of of not having sex outside marriage, and they think it's a human right, and they're going to have shit fits if you dare to restrict that right. So it's something to consider about the practicalities and the framing of this restriction in the Quran. It is actually an excellent way of doing it, because you can be as strict as you want and also as liberal as you want, but you have to say that having children outside marriage is not allowed and is a criminal offence and is a sexual offence for which there will be corporal punishment. And that is all. That is all the sex education you need as a teenager. So Vihu says he wants to have sex with every woman that he sees. I'm sure he's exaggerating a little bit. Well, the point is, yes, you can try and have sex with every woman that you meet, but she'll tell you where to get off. And if you want to have sex with a woman who isn't your wife, you should go. You should hire the services of a prostitute. So, as I was saying to these Americans, quoting chapter 24, verse 2 of the Quran, they just didn't get it. I mean, it's terribly sad. And I've just been watching a bit of the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and there's these two young men saying how shocked and disgusted that abortion could be allowed at 40 weeks. And yes, of course, partial birth abortion is well horrific when you think about it. But even then, you could actually say, yeah, you can have an abortion, but you have to have 100 lashes before you get one, before you are, technically able to have this abortion. And once you do that, the behavior of women will change. They will they will take greater care to avoid unwanted pregnancy. And these days, I mean, I guess in the olden days, before the DNA test was invented, men could always skip town or say, I don't know that woman, I've never met her in my life, that kind of thing. And, what she'd say, you're the father of her bastard. So, but these days you can't get away with it. If she knows your address, knows where you live, and has got a bit of your DNA to file a successful paternity suit, then you're in for it. But I would have the rule that the father, sorry, a man is not obliged to support his illegitimate offspring. So she won't be able to say, oh, but he promised me, rubbish like that. And what would happen is that, yeah, she can have an abortion, but she'll get 100 lashes in public before she gets one. Or she has a kid and gives it up for adoption. And these are her choices. So it's not a problem. You can interpret the law in a way that will send a lot of non-verbal signals to those subject to that punishment. But I'm afraid because of the degeneracy of condoning widespread illegitimacy in the West, most men don't really get what I'm saying, or they're too frightened to, engage with me on it, and they'll just go on and on going round and round in circles. But the solution's very simple, and in fact, secular Quranism is the solution. But these men are just too degenerate to acknowledge that secular Quranism is indeed the solution. I mean, so these men who object to my proposal, they would be unmarriageable bachelors. And the thing about this is that, once you classify these people in this way, you can say, well, I don't have to listen to you because people like you would say that, wouldn't you? Because you're an unmarriageable bachelor, you will want sex to be cheap and nasty. And, you wouldn't be, we wouldn't expect an unmarriageable bachelor to support the institution of marriage because he's not going to enjoy it. The best that he can hope for is to hire prostitutes in red light districts to satisfy his occasional needs, and that's it. But you see, these unmarriageable bachelors refuse to even concede this point that marriage is for the rearing of the next generation in optimum conditions. They won't even, acknowledge that, men who marry deserve a higher status, and they do, particularly those who are married fathers. But these selfish and unmarriageable bachelors will forever pretend not to understand what I mean. And this is the sort of moral degeneracy of the West, that, they won't acknowledge that something that even a child of 12 would. So a child who obviously isn't expected to marry would, I'm sure, agree with me that it is better that most of the next generation are reared in homes run by their two married biological parents in a loving relationship. But these selfish, degenerate, confirmed bachelors who are unmarriageable won't even agree this obvious truth. And this is really the difficulty I face. I know because, in nationalist circles, most of these low status, low education, low information men would be unmarriageable. And so, they are understandably indifferent to supporting an institution that they know they will never enjoy. But if these men who complain about immigration refuse to support marriage, it can easily be put to them that that the reason why they don't support marriage is because they have no intention or prospect of becoming married fathers, and you can dismiss their opinion and they can just shut up and go away, and we would only listen to men who are married fathers or who are married or who have to say that they want to marry, and only they would have their opinions heeded. The rest will, people like Joe will just be dismissed with, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Nobody wants to marry you. You'll never enjoy marriage, so of course you wouldn't support it. And that's why you want sex, the price of sex, to be nasty and cheap. And you don't care, because you are an atheist, about the future of your society or your nation, your civilization. You just don't care because you're an atheist and you are unmarriageable and you are not prepared to make the sacrifices that is required of the men who are expected to parent the next generation. So these points can be easily made again and again until the penny drops. But unfortunately, people like Nick Griffin and, all the other alt-right YouTubers, they don't dare say these things because they know exactly who funds their super chats. And it's certainly not married fathers. So they're in a bind, but we just have to understand why they are corrupt. They know on which side their bread is buttered, and they're just going to pander to the lowest common denominator because they fear to alienate their funders. So in a way, they are just as corrupt as the politicians they keep complaining about. And that's why they won't talk to me. Yes, Bihu, I think this is the most sensible thing you've said so far. Marriage is high risk and high reward. It is actually the most important partnership you can hope to make in your life. It could make you or destroy you. And so you should choose carefully, and so you shouldn't go around fucking sluts. And even if you don't marry the sluts you pump and dump, you are actually wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of resources chasing skirt. So you should, not take the scattergun approach and just go for any woman that you think you might get lucky with. You should choose her carefully, and there should be a period of courtship in which she and you present the best side of your personalities to each other. But these ideas are alien now to the degenerate Westerner. They would think, well, I'm certainly not going to marry somebody I, didn't find sexually competent or some such rubbish. So this is really the problem of degeneracy. I mean, I see these things very clearly. I think I think people would, if if their minds were free and not afraid of alienating the majority around them who take it for granted that sex between consenting adults is a human right. So the Americans don't really get the idea. I mean, I do hope you go on Twitter and follow me and engage with me there. It actually saves a lot of time, and you should obviously like my tweets and share my tweets, and this is the quickest way to get the message through now that we know that censorship on Twitter is imminently going to be relaxed. This is what you should do if you want to be politically active. You should encourage others to do so, and you should encourage them to follow me. And my ideas are more easy to understand, remember, and shareable on Twitter. So YouTube is a way for me to project my personality and make you more assured that I am a real person. And I suppose, in the cold light of day, 250 characters in a tweet can be useful but cold. So I will repeat that I think the ideological war is eminently winnable, but only if people do think, well, do as I say. You have to do as I say for things to work. You can't do things your own way because you don't like what I say, because what I say is right, and what you think and prefer is weak and degenerate. And you already know that I am the thought leader of the alt-right, surprising though this might seem. It is ironic and surprising, and perhaps one of the practical jokes that God, in his wisdom, might play on you for your sins. So I think it would be a good idea to follow the Americans, follow Joseph Ford Cotto, and I think you can pick up a few cues from who I am following. It would be a good way of showing group identity and group solidarity if you all behaved in a certain way on Twitter, and um, you've heard of this idea of keyboard army. I think I can make it work for you because I don't have a wife that I'm afraid of. When you think of your senior politicians with their expensive wives, with their very politically correct and feminist views, you can imagine that they'd be quite afraid of their wives. They don't want any fraught arguments about politics, particularly when the threat of no fault divorce is always hanging over them. So, if you'd like to win this fight, if you want to try and do something before it all goes bang or boom, then you can follow me on Twitter. It is a powerful platform. It has the prospect of having its censorship lifted. You can reach a lot of people. You can say a lot of things in a very concise and effective way. And I am one of the great communicators of our time. Thank you for listening.